Guadalupe Steiner. I represent Mujeres Unidas, Women United organization. Mujeres Unidas stands for strengthening the voices of Latina women and girls to create positive change. This effort is possible through the different programs that we have that are free of charge to both children and adults. The Moorhead Human Rights Commission currently does not have the ability to leverage penalties for discrimination. If elected, will you work to empower the Human Rights Commission through fines, sanctions, or reprimands in order to be effective in addressing issues of discrimination in housing and businesses? Why or why not?
Really no excuse for discrimination in housing or business opportunities in any community. And I'm not real familiar with any constraints that there might be on the Human Rights Commission in Moorhead having authority to investigate and levy fines or penalties, but I certainly would be in favor of having some ability for that group to address those issues in some way. If it's within their charter and within state regulation that they can do investigation and levy fines, then yeah, I would be in favor of that, to bring training to that group to do that properly. I think that given sufficient resources, the commission could do good things, and that insofar as discrimination and in business or housing is taking place in an overt way and in an intentional way, it needs to be disciplined. And
certainly discrimination is an issue of the heart. And it's disappointing that at this point in human history that we're still dealing with an issue as basic as treating people fairly. I do believe that the law that is in place, the laws that are in place are adequate, and that the focus should be on enforcing laws that are currently on the books. Positive change begins human to human, and that's the best kind of sustainable change. And so the more we work with one another, we get to know one another, create relationships with one another, those barriers fall away, and racial biases or any sort of unnecessary biases begin to go by the wayside. And so I'd want to encourage community members to continue.
The opportunity to go out on the web and take a look at the Minneapolis Human Rights Commission and what they have, and they do have the power to leverage fines. But again, in the situation the Moorhead finds itself in right now, the possibility of bringing in additional staff at this time is probably not realistic. I've talked to some of the folks on the Human Rights Commission about some of the housing discrimination issues facing the council right now. And I've talked about creating a database not only for landlords to be able to check on renters, but renters to be able to check on the background of landlords, so that they're not walking into a situation where a landlord has a history of discrimination and we have a family walking right into that situation again. I think the public needs to be aware of those landlords who discriminate, and they should be shamed, either in getting out of the landlord business or leaving.
I apologize, Senorita Steiner was my Spanish teacher, and I'm not representing her very well up here. Apparently I haven't been practicing. As far as the Human Rights Commission goes, I think it is very important to see what they could do as far as penalizing in the future. Discrimination is obviously not acceptable at any means this day and age, and it shouldn't have been ever. With addressing on how to accomplish it will be more difficult, as Mark has mentioned. We're not exactly have an overflow of cash right now with the city, but it's definitely something that when you look at in the future, I noticed on the minutes for the commission and discussing it with on how you guys accepted the police department's deal right now, where they're kind of wanting to look at their own into their own investigations, and you guys kind of want to take over it. And I think we just need to all communicate and work together to try and get rid of discrimination altogether in the city.
I would agree with previous statements that there's absolutely no excuse for us to tolerate that in housing or in business. I would first of all wanna meet with, the different organizations that are seeing it on a day-to-day basis and seeing, patterns, and find out what forms they're taking. I would be open to discussing with the commission if they need additional tools that aren't already provided, with existing laws that we have to enforce that and to minimize that. I think that exposure to different cultures, diversity, like we talked about before, are some of the best tools to reduce discrimination in our community. I've attended events here as well and expose my children to different cultures, different ways of doing things. I think that the groups here tonight do a good job at that, and it really is about education and getting people kind of exposed to things that get them out of their comfort zone, and
Discrimination in housing and business is a crime. It's a legal issue. It's a violation of the law. And the commission is currently made up of volunteers, and it's not a law enforcement body. If the commission suspects that discrimination has occurred in business or housing, they should have access to the city attorney and other law enforcement officials to report those concerns and have their suspicions investigated by the bodies who are trusted to do so. The commission also has the authority to report to the city council if their concerns are not being addressed appropriately by those charged with enforcing the law.
I would not be in favor of letting the Human Rights Commission have this kind of power. That takes a special kind of training. You would end up more than likely every once in a while with a court situation. It's better to let people that are trained, whether it be our local law enforcement officials and prosecutors or the State Human Rights Commission, to do that. When I helped set up the Human Rights Commission back in the early 90s, what we really wanted to have is a group that would advise the council on ways to educate our citizens, all of our citizens, on discrimination, how to identify it, how to root it out of yourself, because almost all of us have some sort of a discrimination pattern. The education, I believe, still is the key for the
volunteer
human rights.
basis. It's a volunteer citizens, so we're thankful for those citizens to be on there. But are they trained in the aspects of all the law? Again, I don't feel that they might have that intuitive training that they need. And the city's not in a place right now to add staffing, to add that employment, because that should really be a city function and not on a volunteer basis. I think there are the laws in place right now that the commission should bring forward and work with the citizens. They are really the sounding board for the citizens. So if they find that there's discrimination in housing or in employment or in business, residents should, again, approach the commission, or first of all, approach the council, the city council or the mayor, and keep that open line of communication. So you have to really look at, is that the best use of volunteer basis to put that kind of pressure to be able to lay out down fines, sanctions, or reprimands? I think that's too much for volunteers. We need to keep that for
I believe that the Human Rights Commission should protect our human rights. I believe they should be a huge advocate for anyone that is in a position dealing with discrimination. Discrimination is wrong and no one should have to deal with it alone. So having advocates is very important. As far as the Human Rights Commission, the ability to leverage penalties, I believe that they are there as a resource and an advocate to help the people, and I believe the level of empowerment should not be held at a local level when we have state and federal laws to